Hey guys, I'm Robert and I'm going to show you guys how to name ionic compounds. We're going to go from a compound formula to its name. You have two main types of cations, the ones in groups 1A through 3A, where all you need to do is write down the element's name, and then you have the transition metal ones, which carry multiple ions, so you need to write down the element's name plus its charge in Roman numerals. For the anions, they're in groups 5A through 7A, and you need to write down the element's name with the "ide" suffix. For example, oxygen would be called oxide. We're also going to name compounds with polyatomic ions. Let's begin. Our formula is LiF. First, we need to write down each of the elements' name. Li is lithium. F is fluorine, and since we're naming a compound, we're going to call it fluoride. And the name for LiF is lithium fluoride. Our formula is BeCl2. First, we need to write down each element's name. Be is beryllium. We have Cl. Cl is chlorine, and since we're naming a compound, we're going to call it chloride. And the name is beryllium chloride. And if you're wondering why it's not called beryllium dichloride, since we have two chlorine atoms, the compounds that use the prefixes like di, tri, tetra, and so on are the binary molecular compounds, and they're made up of nonmetals between groups 4A to 7A. For example, NF3, both nitrogen and fluorine are both nonmetals between groups 4A to 7A, so we would call NF3 nitrogen trifluoride. And if we look, beryllium is in group 2A and does not fall within groups 4A to 7A, so we would not use the prefixes in this compound. Our formula is Na2O. First, we need to write down each element's name. Na is sodium. We have O. O is oxygen, and since we're naming a compound, we need to call it oxide. And the final name is sodium oxide. Our formula is Al2O3. First, we need to write down each element's name. Al is aluminum. We have O. O is oxygen, and since we're naming a compound, we're going to call it oxide. And the name is aluminum oxide. Our formula is K2S. First, we need to write down each of the elements' name. K is potassium. We have S. S is sulfur, and since we're naming a compound, we're going to call it sulfide. And the name is potassium sulfide. Our formula is CoCl2. First, we need to write down each element's name. Co is cobalt. Cobalt is a transition metal, and it has multiple ions. And if we look at number 2, the elements with multiple ions, we need to write down the element name, in our case cobalt, and then in parentheses, we need to write down the charge with Roman numerals. Right now, we don't know what charge we have, so we need to work backwards to find that out. So I'm just going to write down cobalt symbol with a question mark. We have Cl. Cl is chlorine, and it carries a -1 charge. And we have two chlorine atoms. The -1 plus -1 leaves a charge of -2. We want these to balance out, so this cobalt must carry a +2 charge. The +2 and -2 charges, they would balance each other out. And since the cobalt has a +2 charge, that means we have cobalt 2. you need to write its charge with Roman numerals. And now we have chlorine, and since we're naming a compound, we're going to call it chloride. And the name is cobalt-2 chloride. Our formula is CO2O3. First, we need to write down each element's name. CO is cobalt. Cobalt's a transition metal, and we're going to have to work backwards to find out which charge we have. So I'm just going to write down cobalt symbol. And if you look in the formula, we have two of them, so I'm going to write down two. We have O. O is oxygen, and it carries a -2 charge. And the formula has 3. The -2 plus -2 plus -2 leaves an overall charge of -6. We want these to balance out. And if each cobalt had a +3 charge, 3 plus 3 leaves an overall charge of +6. The +6 and -6 charges, they would balance each other out. And since each cobalt atom has a +3 charge, that means we have cobalt-3. And then we have oxygen, and since we're naming a compound, we're going to call it oxide. And the name is cobalt-3 oxide. Our formula is Cu2O. First, we need to write down each element's name. Cu is copper. Copper is a transition metal, and it has multiple ions. And we need to work backwards to find out which charge we have. So I'm just going to write down copper's symbol. And we have two of them. And we have O. O is oxygen, and it carries a -2 charge. We want these two to balance out. And if each one were to have a +1 charge, the 1 plus 1 leaves an overall charge of +2. And the +2 and -2 charges, they would balance each other out. And since each copper has just a +1 charge, that means we have copper-1. And O is oxygen, and since we're naming a compound, we're going to call it oxide. And the name is copper-1 oxide. Our formula is ZNO. First, we need to write down each element's name. Zn is zinc. Zinc is a transition metal, and it does not carry multiple ions. We know it only carries a +2 charge, so that means we only need to write down its name. We have O. O is oxygen, and since we're naming a compound, we're going to call it oxide. And the name is zinc oxide. Our formula is Na2SO4. First, we need to write down each element's name. Na is sodium. SO4 is a polyatomic ion, and if we look at this list, SO4 stands for sulfate. And the name is sodium sulfate. Our formula is NiClO2. First, we need to write down each element's name. Ni is nickel. Nickel is a transition metal, and it carries multiple ions, so we need to work backwards to find out its charge. So I'm just going to write down its symbol here. We have ClO, which is a polyatomic ion. If we look at this list, ClO stands for chloride, and it carries a -1 charge. And we actually have two of them, so I'm going to write it down twice. So we have -1 plus -1 leaves an overall charge of -2. We want these to balance out. If this nickel atom had a +2, the +2 and -2 charges, they would balance each other out. And since nickel has a +2 charge, that means we have nickel 2. And then ClO stands for chloride. So we have nickel 2 chloride. Our formula is AlNO23. First we need to write down each element's name. Al is aluminum. NO2 is a polyatomic ion, and if we look at this list, NO2 is nitrite. And the name is aluminum nitrite. Our formula is Cu3PO42. First we need to write down each element's name. Cu is copper. Copper is a transition metal and it carries multiple ions, so we need to work backwards to find out which charge we have. So I'm just going to write down copper's symbol. And if we look at the formula, we actually have 3 coppers. We have PO4. PO4 is phosphate and it actually carries a -3 charge. And we have 2 phosphates. The -3 plus -3 leaves an overall charge of -6. We want these to balance out, and if each copper had a +2 charge, +2 + 2 + 2 leaves an overall charge of +6. The +6 and -6 charges, they do balance each other out, and since each copper atom has a +2 charge, that means we have copper 2. And then PO4 is just going to take its name, which is phosphate. So our name is copper 2 phosphate. Our formula is NH4NO3. First we need to write down both of their names. Both NH4 and NO3 are polyatomic ions. If we look at NH4, NH4 is ammonium. We have NO3. NO3 is nitrate. And the name for this compound is ammonium nitrate. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope it helped out some. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and good luck.